Good afternoon and welcome to this live stream with myself, Ruth from Top Schools. And this afternoon I have a very special guest. We are in beautiful Taipo at the Japanese International School, and I have Josh Blue, head of the school. Hi, Josh.
Hi, Ruth. Good afternoon.
Welcome. So thank you for watching. We are pulling apart the PYP. And so if you have any questions at all to ask to Josh about the PYP, please type them now and we will get to them. So maybe I should just make a start by asking you to just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background as a PYP educator.
Okay. Well, I've been in Hong Kong for over 20 years. I came in January 2003 to work with an English language nonprofit organization. I grew up in the United States, did my teacher training there. From the nonprofit, I moved into international schools. So I've worked at a number. I worked at Kingston, where I taught primary 2. And then I came here to the Japanese International School from 2006 when they were authorized as an IB PYP school. And then until 2013. And I left here as the coordinator and moved to ESF Kennedy School as the VP PYP coordinator. And then I moved to Discovery College as head of primary. And then last August 2022, is that right?
Yes.
2022, I came back to JIS as the principal.
Yeah, you'll see a huge spike in your LinkedIn profile views.
Right.
Because I was just advising a couple of parents this morning to, always check out the staff in the school. So thanks for that introduction, Josh. So, and not only are you a teacher and now the principal of the school, you have a special role in the PYP.
Yeah, so I've been with PYP schools since 2004. I've been a workshop leader since 2011 or 2012. So workshop leader, evaluation leader, program leader, which means that I visit other IB schools and lead evaluation visits. And I do that for the PYP, but I also sit on panels for multi-program schools as well. I also field rep at large events. So in April, I'll be in Hanoi field repping for a series of workshops that are being held there.
So we're very lucky to have you. So you really, truly are a PYP expert.
Well, we're always learning, right?
So please ask Josh, Mr. Blue, anything related to, we should actually explain, it's the primary years program of the International Baccalaureate. Most of our parents are very well clued up, but it is the most prevalent primary program offered in Hong Kong schools, I'm relatively sure.
It is, and very, very popular across Asia.
So why is it so popular?
I guess it depends on your perspective. So I think for a lot of families, it's popular because it puts the child at the center of the learning, which I hope happens in all learning communities. Which I know is a little bit soft of an answer. I also think that it's about learning through inquiry and learning the skills and dispositions that you need to be successful in any kind of learning environment. So we as learners need to learn how to communicate. We need to learn how to manage our time. We need to learn how to collaborate. All of those skills, the approaches to learning, are at the heart of the PYP. So it's that skill development along with the development of conceptual understanding of the world around us that makes the PYP unique, I think. It's not a very articulate answer, but...
No, it is. It's a textbook answer. But is that to say that some of those other learning programs or curricula don't have those? Because obviously the difference between, learning skills is a very hot topic. And I think any school... certainly in Hong Kong would profess that they absolutely do instill these skills that the children will need for the future. Does PYP do that perhaps slightly better or in a different way?
Well, so I've been in the PYP for so long that it's hard for me to know exactly how other programs are working. But because we work with a socio-constructivist idea or ideal when...
Would you break that down?
Yeah, I'm about to.
Yeah, thank you.
So within the PYP, it's a socio-constructivist kind of approach, which means we believe that children or people, learners, learn from working with each other, asking each other questions and building on each other's ideas and theories about the world around them. The PYP is a curriculum framework It is not a curriculum. There's no magic PYP book that comes out in every school. We have what's called a program of inquiry. That program of inquiry is around 6 different transdisciplinary themes. Do you want me to go over those themes? No, I didn't think so.
We can post a link later.
So, and then the approach is transdisciplinary. So that means that we look at learning not in silos and in isolation, but we look at different traditional, perhaps, disciplines of learning like maths or language through this lens that the world works around, right? Because you don't just use maths because we're studying maths. You use maths because you have problems to solve. You need to figure out the tip at the end of a bill, or you need to check and make sure you've got enough money on your octopus card to buy the snacks at 7-Eleven, or whatever that might be. But with that transdisciplinary approach, it still means that we're teaching the skills needed. You still need to know number. You need to know how to add and subtract and multiply. You need to know how to write a really good sentence, even if AI is taking over the world. You need to know how to spell and how to read. So all of those components are still part of the PYP. We just approach it a little bit differently.
I lost my question. I think that parents, well, let's stick with, we understand, I think most parents understand the transdisciplinary nature of the PYP, but then because there's no magic book, as you put it, then how do we evaluate one PYP school compared to another? So say, for example, I've seen a huge disparity in the numeracy or the literacy program that is taught in each school. What tips do you have? Will you evaluate schools? So
when schools are evaluated, they're evaluated against the IB standards and practices. Those standards and practices, the standards are the same regardless of the program. The practices that sit under those standards will change whether it's a PYP school or an MYP or a DP or CP program. So from that standpoint of evaluation by an external body, that's what we are looking at. And then there are criteria that we're looking for. For school, in regards to language or mathematics, each school will either adopt the IB scope and sequence documents, which are a progression of learning that's developmentally appropriate. And so currently those progressions of learning are being updated, and we'll have new documentation to support us in, I think, 2024, 2025. Sometimes things are delayed.
What's the current one? When was that?
So our latest documents came out in 2018, Principles into Practice, which is kind of like our guiding document.
And so Principles into Practice, that's a document that's presumably available for everyone to access, or is it?
So it's accessible to IB schools. For parents, though, I would recommend just Googling PYP playlist, kind of like your playlist on your phone. It's this IB resource that has lots of mini modules and videos about different components of the program. It's a really great resource. It's the resource that I recommend to new parents at our school or for families that are looking for more information.
To understand more about the PYP.
Absolutely.
But then to understand more about, as I say, how individual schools are performing to these standards and practices. Again, just from a parent point of view, because it's something that parents ask us all the time. The first question that we've had from Kevin Yoon, thank you for your question. I mean, he's straight in there. I think we were speaking for a few seconds. He wants to know the assessment criteria and frequency. This is a very common question.
So, and this is also a misconception, I think, when we talk about the PYP, because when we talk about assessment criterion and frequency, we're often talking in terms of the DP, because that's what people hear about, the 8-point scale, and what does that look like, and what number is my child getting? That does not exist within the realm of the PYP. We talk about the 4 dimensions of assessment, which are monitoring, documenting, reporting. I knew I was going to forget the last one, Ruth. I can't remember that last one. Our assessments are built into what we're doing. So most PYP schools, and I'm going to say most because, as you pointed out, how schools implement the PYP is we've got a framework. And so it is going to look different depending on the school. And that's partially because every learning community is different. The demographics of the students in the school, the population of teachers, where they come from. You know, the PYP doesn't only exist in international contexts, it exists within national and state curriculums as well. And so there's a difference in how that's approached. Assessment in the PYP is very much formative in nature. So that's what that means is, let's pretend I'm making food for a dinner party and I'm making a big pot of soup. The formative assessment is me as the chef coming in and tasting the soup and deciding, oh, does it need more garlic? It always needs more garlic. If it needs more salt or pepper or whatever. And it allows me to adapt as I go. Well, formative assessment in the classroom is me gauging where students are at, checking in with their learning goals, and being able to adapt and change to their needs to help them reach the outcome.
But again, I think a lot of parents want to know, how does the soup taste? Does your soup taste better than mine or the next pot of soup?
PYP schools globally, we don't
No.
have like a ranking system like the IB does. Like, I know the
Yeah.
big day is it usually July when the IB scores come out, the diploma scores?
Yeah.
And those appear in the press. And that's what people think about when they think about the IB. But the PYP is a very different program. It's not about that.
Okay, so we are talking about small children, you know.
Yeah,
so in
absolutely.
your school, you accept children from 4 to 11. Right?
Yes,
12.
correct.
Yeah.
Reception to primary 6. Yeah.
Yeah.
So our kids are 3.5 if they join us in reception, 3.5 or 4 in the August of the entering year.
So to answer Kevin's question, it's formative assessments.
There are some summative, and you know, different schools might also decide to use external standardized assessment, but there's no what's the word I'm looking, mandate from the IB that such assessment is used.
But let's talk about those sorts of standardized assessments, because most of the schools in Hong Kong would do that. They would either use a Cat 4 or a
INCAS,
MAP test, the INCAS,
or the ISIS,
or the other one, which is the what's the one, the OECD for all the international schools? I forget.
Is that not the ISIS?
Yes. Was it ISA?
Yeah,
yes.
We call them the ISIS.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean.
So those are all very interesting tools.
Yeah.
So the INCAS, for instance, is produced out of the UK.
Yep.
It is incredibly.
They've changed it this year to be Primary Insight. It's just an update.
Right. The INCAS has, so I can only speak about what I know from the past, but the INCAS has traditionally been very Eurocentric. And when you're running assessments within an international setting, you actually need assessment tools that cater for the needs of that environment. I remember running an assessment here in the 2000s, and I didn't know what the vocabulary was that was going through this test. I didn't know what the picture was. It was something that was very UK centric, and I couldn't adapt to it.
They've got pounds and pence and stuff.
And the INCAS gives you some in the moment data about how that student performed on that day. But it doesn't, in my opinion, and how we've used it in schools, it doesn't give us a solid picture, or it also doesn't give us any indication besides this student is performing below in maths, but it doesn't tell us how they're performing below in maths, where the gap might be, or this student is achieving above in reading, but we don't know if that's in comprehension or inference or what is that. A test like the ISIS, great, but it runs on an Australian calendar, and so you have it done in September, you get the results in January. Well, the child who tested in September is a completely different child by January. So we can use it retrospectively and think about, oh, how has this child progressed? And did we pick up on that initially? Any of these tests that are used are valid assessments. I'm not saying they're not valid. What I'm saying is that we have to look at them as a tool to see how we're best going to use them.
Yeah. Point taken. I hope that answers your question, Kevin. Answered some of my questions. So if you have any other questions, we're with Josh Blue, principal at the Japanese International School in Taipo, talking about the primary years program, the PYP. So anything at all, I'm sure Josh knows the answer. So I have a few questions. So a really common question that's often asked is how will I know if this is right for my child? So if they come to your school, I mean, we've just taken a tour, it's beautiful. It's just, yeah, it's just got such a lovely feel about it. So yeah.
Thank you very much.
But then how would I know? Maybe I've got two children and they're really different. So how do I know if it's right for my child?
So I've been asked this question a lot through my years at different schools in Hong Kong. And the one answer I continually say is, you've got to follow your gut. I remember looking at different universities and colleges and trying to decide where to go. And I got to the campus. I went to Grinnell College in Grinnell, Iowa, which is middle of the cornfield, small student enrollment. But we got there and I just thought, this is where I belong. And I get chills just thinking about it. And I remember taking a family around Kennedy School and having this conversation, and they were really torn about where to go. And I'm still in touch with this particular parent. And she said it was that tour and that feeling that I got. Now, that feeling is great. And it should be an indicator. If you're looking at different schools and you're feeling better about one or the other, then make that decision. But I always say to parents, whatever decision you make for that moment in time is the right decision for that moment of time. We can't retrospectively look back and think, oh no, I made the wrong choice. It's not good enough, or it's not what I wanted, or whatever. We have to make choices for the moments that we're in. Now, do I believe in moving a child around every year to try and find? No, because we need time for children to settle in. Primary school is 6 years. If you follow your gut at entry to primary school and you feel really good about it, odds are you'll still feel pretty good by the time you get to year 6. And then it's time to reevaluate and be like, okay, what is the next step? Have I been in a PYP school and now I want to move to British curriculum because my child's going to go to the UK for boarding school? Or do I want to move to an American system because family's relocating in 2 years? We really have to consider all those factors.
Yeah, we talked earlier about, this is only a primary school. And so, when you're choosing a school for your 3-year-old or 4-year-old, it is really for now and for maybe the next 3 to 5 years.
Absolutely.
But you must get this all the time as well with, people considering a reception or a year 1 place. It's like, well, where's my child going to go to for secondary school?
Absolutely, we do. We have a reciprocal agreement with ICHK Secondary, which is a bit farther north from here. And excuse me, I would say about a third to half of our students in our primary 6 class, so we currently have about 23 in our P6 class, will go to ICHK. And then the rest of the students will make choices that are right for them. So they might go to ESF, or they might go to Harrow, or they might go to Malvern or Nord Anglia or Kellett, or they might go overseas to boarding school as well.
So moving or supporting children to transition in and out of the PYP and also MYP and DP is often cited that it's very adaptable and it's very easy for children to move between the different programs. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I think that, it's going to come down to the child and where they're at. And every child is different and there are different types of learners. And it might come down to, all right, we're in P6 now. We've had conversations around learning. A more structured environment might be better for secondary school, or a more outdoor learning based choice might be better for your child.
Not a huge amount of choice in Hong Kong.
No, not in Hong Kong. No.
Yeah. So let's go back to the curriculum. If you have any questions related to the primary years program, I'm sure you do, then now is the time, because we've got Josh here for about maybe another 20 minutes or so. Let's talk a little bit about just going back. So PYP is not a curriculum, and it's not, because it's often misunderstood, right? So as you explained, it's a framework. Can you just talk to us maybe in your school, then how does that filter down? So you have an IB coordinator who then puts the syllabus together, or how does it work?
So we have a PYP coordinator. Priya Kapoor just started with us last June. So essentially how it works in an IB school is that you would have your scope and sequence documents, which are your learning progressions, which identify outcomes that are developmentally appropriate. So,
and are those defined by IB, or are they defined by each school?
So it depends. So we can use the IB scope and sequence as it is written. More often than not, though, schools will adapt to fit the needs of their community. So for instance, the Stanford American School in Singapore is an IB PYP school, but they run Common Core. So their outcomes will be from the Common Core curriculum, but be integrated into the units of inquiry and approached from a transdisciplinary lens.
Right.
So for us, our outcomes are foundationally built from the IB, but then we have also tapped into curriculum resources from New Zealand and Australia and the UK and the US to make sure that we have alignment. The IB does the same when they produce their documents, but sometimes we might want something a little bit more specific.
So it really is almost like some building blocks. And so I've been to schools where so which reading program do you use, for example, here?
It's
a difficult question.
It is a difficult question because we don't have one set reading program.
Okay.
Currently, from an assessment standpoint, once a child is reading, so we're moving beyond the phonics level because we do teach phonics. It's not a whole language approach in that regard. We would use the PM benchmarks, which is a series of leveled books, set of guided questions with them. We do what's called a running record. The questions look at inference and literal questions. We look at the ability to retell. We look at decoding and fluency as well.
So do you advise, I mean, what I'm getting from this is it's really interesting, actually. It's more than it's education for me. I'm learning more. Advise parents to ask when they go to the school, okay, this is a PYP school, but which other programs are you bringing in to support the numeracy, the literacy, the language arts? I
mean, I would want to know, how is my child's entering at reception. How are they going to learn, their phonics? What approaches do you use for spelling? All of these things are still part of the curriculum. For maths, is there a particular central framework that you use and you build off of it? Every student doesn't have a textbook or anything because that's not really in belief with the program. There are PYP schools that do have textbooks, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong, but you have to make sure that the textbook fits in line with the pedagogy. So the approaches to learning and teaching. For us, by having ownership of our scope and sequence, it means we all own it. We have helped co-construct it. And so as we're developing learning engagements and assessment to see where children are at, we have an invested interest because we've helped construct the curriculum. It's not today is day 12, week 3, we're doing this.
But then how do you evaluate how effective it is?
So we use some of the standardized kind of assessments to see where students are at. We're about to use a new assessment tool called the PACE, which comes from the same company that produces the ISA. The difference here is that we're able to set it twice a year, and we can get a benchmark at the start of the year. The tool itself provides better detailed information around so if we're looking at the strand of number in mathematics, we can pinpoint where gaps might be to help inform learning and teaching. And then we can return to it in May and see where that progression has been. It gives us an indication not only of how a learner has learned, but also how a teacher has taught. And if we have done our due diligence to meet the needs of the children.
You've used the word progression quite a lot, I've noticed. I mean, and that is really what any parent wants to know, right? So how much of that data, or how much of that are you feeding back to the parents in terms that their child is always progressing? Right.
So the PACE is a new tool that we're using, and it is a formative assessment tool. It is a school-based tool. So I don't imagine us sending reports on that out. However, we have an obligation to keep parents informed. So if that initially pops up and we see something, then we're going to have that conversation. We have reporting periods across the year. We report with every unit, and we have termly reports as well. We have parent-teacher conferences in October, 3-way conferences which involve the student in March, and then student-led in June.
And then you have the
The exhibition?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so the exhibition is and it actually goes back to that assessment piece too. For the PYP, the summative assessment at the end of the program is the exhibition. Now, traditionally within the PYP, the exhibition used to happen at the end of the final year of primary school. With our new guidance that came out in 2018, I hope I've got that year right. Someone will correct me if not. Right. The exhibition can be done over a year. It can be a reflective process for that entire year. It could be a learning journal. But in its most traditional sense, we usually take one of the transdisciplinary themes and the students write a central idea. They write their lines of inquiry, and then they do a really in-depth inquiry into an area of interest or passion.
Yeah, give us an example of a couple of the exhibition topics from last year, if you can remember.
So we moved into how we express ourselves as this transdisciplinary theme, and we really looked at people's individual passions and how they could share those with others. Coming out of COVID, we wanted students to be able to celebrate their interest and their thing. So we did have a Minecraft one, but we also had one that looked at educating people about dinosaurs. We had a robotics station where one of the girls in the class created a robot and explained to everyone how that worked. We had people explore dance and music and movie making, aerodynamics. So we ran a full range.
And it's very much student-led.
Very much student-led, and probably more student-led than I've seen for a lot of years. A lot of schools, though, with the exhibition will choose sharing the planet. And so then they'll look at UN global goals. Sometimes that can become a bit heavy. We have to remember that
little kids.
They're 11, 10 and 11 years old. Like, yes, I'm very glad that you're passionate about this area, but would you be passionate if we hadn't forced it upon you? And that raises flags for me. So.
So if you have any questions for Josh Blue, we're with Josh, Principal of Japanese International School. We're pulling apart the PYP. So this is probably almost your last chance to ask any questions to Josh directly. Let me see. So we've gone on a little bit about, forgive me, because the assessment piece, the measurement is the thing that parents ask about all the time.
It is. And
it's been a bit of a mystery to me, because I shared with you, I had children in PYP, and now I've got the benefit of comparison. And also we've got Montessori school in Hong Kong, we've got Canadian curriculum schools. And for parents, it can be very confusing.
I think the one thing that I say time and time again is that if you have questions, ask the school.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, engage in the conversation. And quite frankly, with the teachers here, we have this conversation all the time where I say, just give as much information as you can, because I'm a parent as well. I want to know what's going on. And you need to ask. And I will go to my child's teacher. And even though I work in the school and my son's in the school, I still do it through the formal means. So I'll send a message on our Toddle app and say, do you have time to have a 5-minute chat? Because she doesn't want me invading her space in the middle of a school day.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point. I mean, as parents, we pay a reasonable amount of money for these international schools. And I always encourage parents to ask. You know, you have the right to ask.
You absolutely have the right
to receive a response as well.
Yes, absolutely. But also, and I have to say this too, is to remember that your child is one of maybe 170 or 350 or 900 in a school. And so sometimes the things that you might request something that we're not able to do. But as long as as long as I'm able to explain why we can't particularly do that, and perhaps I'll suggest another feasible solution, it's a dialogue. We want to have positive relationships and good conversations.
Of course. And at the end of the day, as parents, we need to trust our school leaders that you know what you're doing. I mean, there is definitely an element of that as well. I mean, parents in Hong Kong are very, very switched on, and they want the answers, but it's not a science exactly, is it? It's I know that we can do tests, we can do standardized tests, we can get some scores, but we have to remember that we're dealing with tiny humans.
And I think a good example of this is when I went to school, it was very traditional. Everything was subject-based. And spelling is the one thing that I remember.
We used to get out of 10 on a
and
list.
it's brought me so much trauma because I was not very good at spelling. And I think about, you know, getting requests to test students or things, but there's a whole nother layer that goes there. And if we look at student well-being as the heart of the thing that we're meant to do, if our students are safe, happy, and well, they will learn. If they're not, we actually can't engage in learning until we reach that point.
It's an absolute prerequisite.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is absolutely true.
We talk about
safe, happy, and well.
Yeah, we talk about what's called PSE, or personal, social,
PSHE?
Personal, social, emotional health fits in there as well. That should really be the heart of everything that schools do, because if we don't get it right,
I think we're all agreed on that. I don't think any parent would disagree about that. They're just saying, like, once we're sure that they're safe, happy, and well, what are they learning?
Sure.
Because this is Hong Kong.
And if you don't know, it's the schools, you need to ask. Like, if I didn't know what was happening in my child's class, I would be sending a very polite and respectful email. It's easy for me. But I would hope as a parent you would choose schools where you feel comfortable to ask those questions.
Let's go into the classroom. So for parents who haven't stepped into a classroom, and it's very different from the way that I learned, for sure. And so what does a transdisciplinary classroom look like with you know, choose whatever central idea or theme?
So it's not all choose whatever. So for the exhibition bit, so let's think about a P2 classroom, right? So walk into a classroom, desks or tables are arranged in groups because we believe in that level of communication. Displays on the wall or things that you see are student created. It's not all, I've bought this resource and it's up on the wall. I've got ownership of the space. We will always see an essential agreement that's been co-constructed by the learners in that class to help identify, you know, what are our shared expectations of one another. Here at I almost said the wrong school. Here at JIS, our core values are kindness, commitment, and respect. And so our essential agreements will encompass that. The progression of learning for the day will be visual and up on the wall. You might not see English, math, science, but you might see inquiry maths, or you might see math standalone, because even though it's the PYP and transdisciplinary, the strands of number and pattern and function are often taught standalone. There still might be areas where you might do some word inquiry, where you're looking at how words are constructed. There might be a block that does say phonics because we're teaching that. So in the transdisciplinary sense, you would have the unit of inquiry, the central idea, and things up on the wall. You'd see that broken apart with student language to help understand. You would see lots of books around, learning resources. If we are doing some maths, it's not going to be all paper-based, but it's going to be, I can never say that word, manipulative-based, where we've got resources and things to engage with. We still teach the things that we learned in school. We just teach them from a different lens. And perhaps the thing that we do, I think, really well in the PYP is that we take the time to pre-assess so we can find out what the students already know. Because Ruth, you've been in a lot of schools. I've been in a lot of schools, but every early primary classroom I go into, they learn what a rectangle and a square and a circle is. And do you know something? They know that before they get to school. We don't need to spend time teaching it. We need to start looking at other things around that. So pre-assessment allows us to really tap into not only what students know, but the misconceptions.
Well, I remember doing an example PYP class, actually, in one of the schools where my children were going into, and they made us, the parents, I think it was something on the solar system, and they said, like, what do you think you know? And it's all valid, right? It's all up for discussion, and it's there to be verified or otherwise. And so what do you think you know? Have a discussion about it, and then is that still what you think? You know, so it was interesting. So a UOI, how many units of inquiry? They last about 6 weeks?
So traditionally in the PYP, units lasted about 6 weeks. 6 transdisciplinary themes, but for our younger learners, so up until age, I'm going to say 6, 7. So for us, reception in P1, they do 4 units a year.
Okay.
Because we really want that time for extended learning. We also have a strong belief in play-based learning. So we want to provide the time for that because that helps build the approaches to learning and the skills that we need. In the other year levels, there are 6 units over the course of the year. Units can vary from 6 weeks to 8 weeks to 4 weeks. Some units might last an entire year and run across that year while the other units are happening. Often in schools, you'll find the Who We Are unit might be a unit that runs across a year because we're looking at sense of self, what makes us human, and those kinds of things.
So we're almost running out of time. We've got lots of people watching, but not too many people asking questions. So really, this is going to be your last chance to ask any questions about the PYP, or perhaps something a little bit not directly related to the PYP to Josh. Let me ask you, so we're in Japanese International School, you're relatively new here. What changes, what plans do you have for the future, for the next few years?
So we actually adapted the timetable this year with the intention. So we're a single form entry school, which means we have 1 class per year level. And I've used that word progression quite a bit, but learning is developmental. So we need to start to think about moving away from this idea that in P1, you learn this and you only learn this, because there are students in that P1 class who could be reaching outcomes that are in P2. And we do our best to reach for that, but we could probably be doing that better. So we've looked at collaborative times between teachers where maybe their classes at specialists so they can plan collaboratively together. We've actually made it a learning goal across the community to make sure that happens, and make sure it happens not within a unit of inquiry, but with a particular subject area. So I know our 5 and 6 team are looking at maths across 5 and 6 and what that looks like to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our students. So the timetable innovation has been a step forward. We've started what's called community clubs, which happen on a Wednesday afternoon. And this was a result of COVID. I came into the school when COVID regulations were still around. And I said, we need to figure out a way to connect again. And so teachers came up with suggestions that we could do for clubs. Ultimately, we wanted to move towards students running those clubs. We didn't reach that point last year, but we're hoping that this year we can. So those will start after the October break, and they'll run for 6 weeks. We've got knitting and crocheting. We've got, there's a group that's going to write our production that will perform in March. Because community clubs for term 2, that time will then turn into the time where we make costumes and props and sets for the production that will be performed in March. And then hopefully term 3, the community clubs will be student-led and student-run.
Amazing. And what were the 3 words that you...
Kindness, commitment, and respect.
And as I walk around the school, and I've not been to this school for about 12 years, and my bad, and please invite me
You're
back.
You're always welcome.
Thank you. But everyone says, hello, how are you? They open the doors. And I think it's a really special school.
Thank you.
So if you have, I think we're out of time. I think they snoozed and they lost.
Okay, well, so I'm here at JIS. You can give me a call.
Well, you have another opportunity to meet Mr. Blue at the International Schools Festival on Saturday. So today's Thursday, so it's the day after tomorrow, the 23rd. Thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't think either.
The 23rd of September. This is 2023 at the Marriott. And we'll post the link. It's not too late to get your tickets. It's going to be busy.
I've been there before for other schools.
It's going to be even busier.
I'm ready.
It's going to be mad. So if you would like to, if parents would like to meet you, you'll be there.
Absolutely. And can I just give a plug? The Playtimes magazine this month, we've got an article. I've got an article on the side of my desk over there. Brilliant. We're actually on the back cover. I can't see that very clearly, but there's some QR codes you can use. And right in the center fold it doesn't pull out or anything. There's our article on Japanese international schools. So please do have a look.
You'll have some copies on your table.
We will have
on
some
Saturday.
copies, yes.
We will as well. So thank you so much, Josh.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Oh, I really enjoyed this.
And
Yeah.
we'll do it again. If you have questions, if you're watching this on replay, I know that this is a funny time, but we wanted to see the school and we didn't want to keep you too late because you have a meeting.
I do.
So we've moved it to 4 o'clock, whereas we're usually at 6 o'clock on a Thursday. So I'm sorry if you missed it. And if you wanted to put your questions in the comments, I'm sure that Josh will get to them as
Certainly.
well.
Absolutely.
There's one. Yeah, let's see. You're welcome. Thanks, Kevin. So I've been Ruth. We will also be at the International Schools Festival on Saturday. Don't miss it. It is the biggest event of the year for parents. If you're looking for a school for 2025, that means if you have a child born in 2023 or older, you should be there. And we'll be there and you can come and have a chat with me as well. So thank you for watching, and we'll say goodbye.
Sayonara.
Bye-bye.